Hope Pedraza to the Let's Talk Thyroid podcast. We are going to have a fun conversation today, a hopeful conversation, because we're all about hope on this
I
podcast,
love
and you're the
it.
first person I've had who's actually called Hope.
Oh,
So
that's so
I think you
fitting.
are perfect.
Thank you so much for having me. I love that so much.
Yeah, so you're going to offer yourself as hope.
I will. I
I
will.
often say to my guests, like, what can you do to offer hope to the listeners?
It's
Well,
me.
we're offering you. It's you.
I love it.
So yeah, so welcome, and we're going to dive into adrenal health and the connection with thyroid health. But before we do that, what's happening in your world, Hope? Like, what's 2023 bringing for you in your, your sort of health space, your business? Like, what, tell us a bit about what you do and what's coming up.
Yeah. So I'm a certified holistic nutritionist, and I'm a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. And this year, I'm going to bring in all my woo side here, but I'm really into human design, and I'm a manifesting generator, which means I am into all the things, and I am multitasking and multi-passion, all that. So this is the year where I I'm reining it in to make it one cohesive thing. So I've been dabbling here and there, and I've done all these different trainings and certifications, and I just finished my level 3 Reiki training, so I can add kind of some energy healing to my work. And so this is the year where I'm like, okay, I've done all the learning. I'm not that I'm done learning, but I've really been okay, let's put a halt on those, you know how it is. It's the next thing.
Yes. I'm often into the next thing.
Yes.
Hold on a minute.
Yes,
consolidate.
exactly. So that's what it is for me now. So I'm just kind of honing it in and just really honing in on how I want to serve my clients in this full comprehensive holistic way, doing with the physical wellness and the mental, emotional, and spiritual wellness, and just tying it all together cohesively.
Wow. And do you see clients in person, or is it all online, or what's your...
It's all
do you do a bit of a
virtual.
mix,
Yeah,
or...
it's all virtual. So I do have a brick and
virtual.
mortar business. I have a brick and mortar Pilates and fitness studio. But my nutrition
cool.
business is all online. So I have clients all over the world, really, Europe and Canada. And I don't have any from Australia just yet, but maybe one day.
Maybe after this
maybe
podcast,
so,
someone
right?
can connect with you.
Right.
Yeah. That's what's so nice, isn't it, about the online
Totally.
space, is that we can connect with people all over the world, and that's certainly been a real gift to me in this podcast, is connecting with people, in different parts around the world.
It's so fun.
Yeah. And you're in Texas, you were just telling me before. So is it cold?
It is cold
there?
Yeah.
Last time I had it.
It's not the typical, because I'm in South Texas, so it's not typical for us, but we're the 5 days of winter we get, this is one of them the past couple of days. So we had this epic ice storm, and everything shut down yesterday. We lost power, and it was a whole thing. But then, and 3 days from now, it's going to be warm and springtime again. So I can't complain too much.
Well, that's interesting, because I'm trying to think, it was last year. It could have even been the year before. I had a couple of interviews with other people in Texas, and I haven't done anyone, I don't think, from Texas since then. And they're in the middle of an ice storm. It was when all the pipes froze.
Gosh, yes.
And we had to put things off because there was no power.
Yes,
and so
that was it.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. And I think that's why everybody was making fun of us yesterday, because literally everything shut down. But I'm y'all, we have PTSD from the last time this happened. Because it was really intense last year. So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. So crazy.
So there we go. So a bit stressful, right? And it probably is stressful.
A little bit.
A nice little segue into our adrenal health.
Right.
So we're going to dive all into stress and adrenals, and just help the audience kind of understand. Because we hear about adrenal fatigue, chronic fatigue, thyroid fatigue. We've got to look after our adrenals, but we haven't really done a deep dive into that on this show. We've probably touched on it in different points. Certainly talked lots about stress, but in terms of really kind of the nuts and bolts, the basics of adrenal health, and really what can we do then to support our adrenals. So that's what I'm looking forward to diving in with you.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah. So can we start at the very beginning, the very basics of what are the adrenals? Where are they in the body, and what do they do?
Yeah. So the adrenals are little bean-shaped glands that sit on top of your kidneys. And essentially, like, to keep it simple, they're responsible for managing stress. And so they make hormones like cortisol and adrenaline and noradrenaline, and which helps us with control our heart rate and our blood pressure, metabolism, immune system. So they really have the adrenals are actually really important for our overall health and like how our body is functioning.
Okay, great. And so they sit over the kidneys, which are like, in our back. Is that right? I'm sort of trying to feel where they are.
Right.
If you can watch on video, yeah. But they are like sit. Because I've also heard people say, well, rub essential oils over your adrenals, or well, where are they? So there actually are sort of in the small of your back.
Yeah, that would be probably pretty accurate.
How would you describe?
Kind of like lower back and kind of the smaller back. I think that's a good way. Yeah, a good place to kind of
to the sides a little bit, I guess. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that for little kind of glands, it sounds like they're kind of Trojan workhorses if they're responsible for all of, essentially for managing stress.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Yeah, they really are.
So I suppose we've got to look after them, a bit like the thyroid. I think it's such this delicate, it's a very delicate gland. We've really very sensitive. We've got to look after it. Are the adrenals sort of sensitive like that too? Like are they easily kind of impacted by, or easily damaged, or things can easily go wrong, or, are they sensitive in that similar way? That's moving. Yeah. So that's all right. The joy of editing.
That's right. You can always fix things, right? Okay, so the adrenals, because they are responsible for our stress response, they really do get a lot of work. And since, in the Western world, at least, we live pretty stressful lives, and our adrenals can really work in overtime. And I think that's, you hear adrenal fatigue and burnout, adrenal burnout, you could hear all these terms. And I had a conversation with somebody the other day. We were talking about that too. Like, what exactly does that mean? Because I think it's kind of it's almost like a buzzword these days. I feel like the word burnout. Like, I don't know if people are really using it in its correct context, but when we're talking about like true adrenal burnout, like your adrenals are just pumping and pumping and pumping cortisol, like just chronically, consistently pumping out cortisol, and they like literally just get tired. And so, I do think that just like the thyroid, that can just kind of, get tired and start wearing out, work a little sluggishly. Our adrenals do the same thing, just because they're working all the time to manage stress and all of those steroid hormones that are associated with it.
Yeah. Okay. And so is that the main thing that goes wrong? Like, if we talk about, what can go wrong with them, that they get worn out, or can they underperform, overperform?
Yeah.
Like, what can go wrong?
It kind of works in kind of a wave pattern here. So when we're talking about when the adrenals start to kind of work overtime, right? We're in this, chronic stress or whatever. So our adrenals are pumping and pumping and pumping, just pushing out cortisol. So you get to a point where your cortisol levels are just chronically high, right? Just consistently, they're high across the board. Well, at some point, your adrenals are going to get tired and they're going to start to wear out. So they're going to start pumping out less and less and less cortisol. So then you kind of, the wave pattern, if you're like picturing in your head, kind of starts moving the other direction. And so at the end, the bottom of that wave is like the full exhaustion phase, where now your adrenals are struggling to make cortisol at all because they're so tired that they're just they're not able to function at full capacity. And this was something that I dealt with myself, and honestly didn't even know until like I was actually going through my FDN program, and I had to do all the labs and stuff for myself. And it was one of those things like, and I'm like, my personality is just like, go and push through it, and, whatever, at least at the time. I feel like I'm a recovering type A, whatever. But I feel like I just, I could feel things that I was just kind of pushing aside. Like, I was feeling like I was having trouble recovering for my workouts, and just being sore and hurting all the time. And like just chronically kind of getting like the sniffles, and just feeling like I was getting sick a lot and tired, and just waking up exhausted and just feeling tired all the time. But, it's just like, oh, I'm just pushing hard in my business. I'm just working hard. Then I get my labs back, and my cortisol levels were like in the toilet. Like, I'm like, how am I even functioning? So there is a point where, yes, your adrenals can work overtime, but then there's a point where they really start underperforming and really not producing the cortisol that you need.
Yeah. Because they're worn
Exactly.
out. Yeah, they just
Exactly.
can't keep.
Right.
I understand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. And so when you said you got your levels tested, how is it a blood test? Like how do you
Yeah, so
test
at the
for your
time,
adrenals?
it was a saliva test. So there's a steroid hormone panel you can run that's just a saliva test, and you spit in some little vials and you test it throughout the day. The lab I use now with my clients is the
Mm-hmm.
Dutch test, which is much more comprehensive, and I find it's a little more accurate than the saliva test, but it's a dried urine test, so you basically just pee on some paper. But I find
Yeah.
it's much more comprehensive than the saliva test. So I do prefer that one. But those are
Mm-hmm.
both good ways to test cortisol levels.
Yeah. Okay. And essentially that's what you're
Yeah.
testing. You're testing for
Yes.
cortisol levels, and that's then indicative of your
Exactly.
adrenal health.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I suppose then, would it be fair to say if you were testing and your cortisol levels were high, you kind of at the peak,
Yeah.
you could be then at the peak of
Mm-hmm.
that curve. And so maybe that's
Yeah.
good because you pick it up
It's
before you've got to
exactly
the
it.
other
Yep,
side. Is
that's
that right?
exactly it. And I can usually tell, I do other labs as an FDN too, and I can usually tell when people are like, they're like at the peak of that, like what you're talking about, and it's like, okay, we can catch it now, we can bring it back to
Mm.
normal, because once you like hit that tipping point, I mean, it's a quick, I feel like it's a quick plummet to the bottom, and all of a sudden your adrenals are like, nope, I'm done, like I can't do it anymore. So yeah, it's almost like a relief when I can catch clients at that point where it's like, okay, we've caught it before, it's that
Mm.
much harder to get it back over the hill onto the other side. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. So, with somebody who's in like that full on like exhaustion state, like my adrenals are like, they're done. That is going to take it. First of all, it's going to take it typically. I don't want to like generalize it saying everybody, but typically it's going to be a longer process. I mean, for some people's exhausted adrenals, I mean, it could be, 12 to 24-month process. Like it's a process to get them back depending on how, worn out their adrenals are. So knowing that it's going to take longer for somebody who's like completely in that exhaustive phase. And for them, it's going to be like a slow and steady process. So it's first going to be like nourishing the adrenals with the right minerals, which I know we'll talk about. And it's, well, actually, let me back up, because first and foremost, it's going to be managing the stress. And that's the big piece here. It's managing the stress and managing your nervous system, because your body is in this fight or flight state for so long, and then it kind of ends up in just the freeze state where your body's like, I don't know what to do anymore. And so it's and I do this with my clients, work with them on like nervous system regulation, strategies or tactics, whatever, to really help manage the nervous system and manage stress, and give them tools that they can use to help manage that, because that's what got you there in the first place. It's the stress. So let's kind of get your nervous system back into working order, and with things like, there's things like breath work and mindfulness, right? There's all different mindfulness tactics you can use, and different breath work and specific breath work for that exhaustive, because there's different breath work for different purposes, right? So knowing like kind of how to use the breath, and ways to just really kind of mediate that stress response and get you out of that stress response. And then too, it is like, going back to what I was going to say, is the like working on nutrition. So it's the mineral piece, it's balancing out your nutrition, what you're eating. And I mean, I think all in all, like looking at it broadly, it's really like, how can we lower inflammation and lower stress on the body? So, taking out whatever's in your diet that's causing inflammation, right? Taking out extreme exercise is a big one. For somebody in the exhaustive phase, I would like, whatever high intensity exercise you're doing has got to stop. Like we got to go low intensity, like walking, yoga, meditation, maybe like Pilates, something that's not going to get your body too worked up. Because I mean that, exercise is a stress on the body, and it can be in a good way. But when you're already in that exhaustive phase, that high intensity exercise, and that was me, like I spent years of my life being a chronic, obsessive exerciser. And that was, I mean, just totally tearing up my body and just ruining my adrenals. So the exercise piece is a huge one too, like understanding how to use movement to support your adrenals rather than continue to, perpetuate the stress on your adrenals. Totally. Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Exactly. Mhm. Mhm. Yep. Yep. It does. Mm. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. 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 There is a huge connection there. Yeah. 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 S-
The
So
thyroid.
the
Yeah.
thyroid kind of takes its cues from the adrenals, right? So first there's the HPA axis, right? So the hypothalamus in the brain, it's the pituitary, which is like the manager gland. It's like managing all the other things. And then there's the adrenal. So all of that is talking to each other, right? And this is kind of like the driving force for the entire endocrine system, which the thyroid is a part of. So really the thyroid kind of takes its cues from the adrenals. The adrenals are kind of like the gas where the thyroid drives the engine, right? So when your gas is running low from the
Mm.
adrenals, that means your thyroid's going to run low, like they're talking to each other. And so when you're in this stress mode, your adrenals are just, they're working on overdrive and they're producing like more cortisol, more adrenaline. The cortisol is going to tell your brain, or the hypothalamus, that's the H part of the HPA, it's going to tell your brain to stop, to tell the pituitary to stop sending your thyroid, like, stop, I don't need any more, stop, because stress is now the top priority. It's not repairing the body, it's not sending the thyroid hormones where it needs to go. It's in stress. So your body is purposely slowing down your thyroid so it doesn't burn out, because it's like, okay, we're in stress mode, we need to conserve, right? So it's halting that, like, what's supposed to be happening. And so when you're in this like hyper alert, hyper vigilant state, your body isn't thinking like, I don't really need any excess like free T3 floating around. Like, so it shifts. It's not going into rest and repair mode. It's going into like alert mode. Like, I need to conserve everything because I'm in this
Mm.
stress mode. And so it slows down the release of the thyroid hormones that you need because it's in this state of stress.
Yeah. It's
Mm-hmm.
protective.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
protecting. It's doing
Exactly.
a protective
Exactly.
job. Yeah. 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 I've had some interesting conversations around that. There's, I don't know if you know Dr. Eric
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Borkovich. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if you've come across him. Yeah, but he talks all about that cell danger response and that, yeah, when the body goes
Yeah.
into protection mode. And so it's not that it's trying to
Right.
damage your thyroid in
Right.
that sense, it's protecting. It's actually
Yep.
working in a protective way. And so how do we let it know that it doesn't
Right.
need to be
Right.
protecting us anymore so that we can get on with
That's
doing all the other
exactly it.
functions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I
So,
love that word
yeah.
pick, because I also think I remember who I was having an interview a while back, and we were talking about like autoimmunity too, where there's this stigma around autoimmunity where it's like, oh, your cells are attacking, your body's hacking itself, where it's like, no,
Mm,
it's literally doing what it's supposed to do, which is protect itself. It's just, in a way that's not helpful to your body. So I think I love that you said that. It's a protective
mm.
thing. Like, that's what it thinks it needs to do. But like you said, it, like, we have to tell it, like, wait, no, I need you to, like, not protect it. I need for it to actually, like, function.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of that mindset too, isn't it? Like because if we think our body's attacking it, our body's
Right.
imploding, our
Right.
body's, all that
Yep.
sort of negative way that we think. And obviously, let's be real, when you're in the peak of it, it feels pretty
Yeah.
crappy. So,
Yeah.
it can feel like your body's hates
Totally.
you. And it's like, no,
Yep.
it's time, we need to wrap our head around the fact that it actually is doing its very best job to protect us so that all the core functions can continue. So how do we lift off some of those layers of protection? We'll tell, put the body in a state where it doesn't need that protection, I suppose, because
exactly.
So we might come to some of those things. So that's where it's connected. And like when you said before, it's that part of the management is that overall reducing in the inflammatory load and inflammation. I mean, that's what I would say about thyroid health. Like that's my entire approach is what can we do to reduce inflammation? So they're obviously, I think they're probably more connected than I had realized increasingly. And I think because I've been focused on thyroid, I've sort of probably just forgotten a bit about the adrenals. So is there a chicken and egg, like is it a chicken and egg scenario, or if you work on the adrenals to help with
It's a good question. And honestly, I mean, obviously it's going to depend on the person, but the more I studied, I went down, it was a couple weeks ago, I went down a rabbit hole with all these different research articles. They were on various things, but some of the research that I've seen, I feel like in a lot of cases, like a lot of cases, like almost like the root cause of hypothyroidism is adrenal fatigue. Like that's what caused it. And I can't say that's every case, but I feel like from a lot of the literature I've seen that is a big root cause. The adrenals have kind of caused the thyroid to, start working a little more sluggishly. So I don't know if it's safe to say, that you can say that across the board, but I definitely see a strong correlation in my clients. Again, I can't say that's how they're started, but just looking at research and stuff, I feel like there is a pretty strong link between adrenal fatigue leading to hypothyroidism. Yeah.
Okay. So really important for those of us with hypothyroidism, or Hashimoto's, that maybe you've been lucky enough to pick up your Hashimoto's early enough that you're not hypothyroid yet. And maybe that's what I love about, I guess being proactive about managing health. And if we can get our antibodies tested and we can discover we've got them and we don't have poor thyroid function yet, then maybe you won't end up with poor thyroid function.
That's exactly
it. But you got to look after your adrenals.
Yeah, you got to take care of both.
Yeah. Okay. So what can we do to look after our adrenal health then? I mean, obviously reduce stress and like that whole inflammatory thing, but let's dive into some of that a little more granularly.
So when we're looking at supporting the adrenals from okay, sorry, you cut out for a second. Do I have you? Okay. Okay. So we're talking about supporting the adrenals as far as, supplementation or minerals. There's a lot we can do. So let's start with the minerals. I think this is really important. So the mineral piece to this for the adrenals, your adrenals use more sodium than really any other part of the body. And so when you're chronically stressed, your body is just like pumping through. It's just draining the supply of sodium in your body. And the same thing with vitamin C. You're going to find the strongest concentration of vitamin C in the body in the adrenals. So vitamin C and sodium work together in the adrenals. And that can be really supportive to support the adrenal, or to help heal what's going on with the adrenals. Now, sodium, I can go down a rabbit hole for hours on sodium, but sodium, I feel like it's like carbs for a while where it got a really bad rap. And it's, we've demonized sodium because we see that it causes heart disease and high blood pressure and strokes and all this stuff. But again, talking about that rabbit hole, I went down a while back looking at some research. If you really look at the research about sodium, and you look back when all of this started talking about sodium causes high blood pressure and strokes and, blah, blah. It started back 100 years ago or something with some doctor who saw some, was seeing some patients that had high blood pressure. And he just made a generalized statement with no research to back it up. And it just kind of stuck. And if you look at the research, there's actually not research that correlates high blood pressure to sodium. And there's studies that compare different, cultures and groups of people who eat, high sodium versus low. There's the correlation is not there. Now, what is correlated is our standard, Western diet. So yeah, talking about eating a lot of processed food, because there's a difference between like eating foods full of table salt and foods full of like high quality, like unrefined salt, right? Like sea salt. And I think that's the difference people don't understand, because when you're eating, so table salt is like, it's like the equivalent of white sugar, right? They poured a bunch of chemicals on it to strip every nutritional value from it. And it's just like the cheap version, right? It's the table salt. That's exactly what it is. They used all these chemicals. They stripped all the other stuff away, and it's just sodium chloride. Like there's no other nutritional value. So when you look at unrefined salt, like pink Himalayan salt or Celtic sea salt is what I always recommend my clients. Where there's a company here, I'm sure they ship international, that gets it straight from the Salt Lake, the Great Salt Lake. Like pure unrefined salts. It's full of like 80 to 90 other trace minerals in the salt. So it's helping with the fluid retention in your cells. So it's not, because that's really, when you're talking about high blood pressure, it's not a sodium problem, it's a sodium retention problem. Because we don't have these other minerals in the body to like push where it needs to go, right? The sodium where it needs to go. So when you're eating this unrefined salt, you have all these other trace minerals to help with the sodium retention, right? And the water, and push it where it needs to go into your body, into your cells. So with sodium, so one of the labs I do with my clients is a hair tissue and mineral analysis. And I feel like one of the most surprising things for most of my clients, I can't say all of them, but for the majority of the clients that I work with, their sodium levels are low. And they're always surprised, like thinking like, oh, isn't that good that my sodium levels are low? Like, actually, no, like your body needs sodium, your adrenals need sodium. So that is the indication to me that their adrenals are running like on E, like they're running out of gas. And we have to supplement that. And so like adding salt to your water, adding salt to your diet, like again, the good quality salt, but you do need the sodium. And it has to be from the right source. But the sodium and the vitamin C, I think those are probably two of the most crucial pieces when it comes to like really supporting and healing the adrenals. Magnesium is another good one. Magnesium is super supportive. And
can I just, before we go into magnesium, can I just, let's dive into the salt a little bit more. So when you're saying, I use Maldon, which is sea salt from
somewhere.
Somewhere.
I know what you're talking about though. Yeah.
It's a pretty well-known. So it's sprinkling that. If you're going to cook with salt, use a good quality salt. And when you say put salt in your water, what do you mean by that?
So I have my clients, and now when we're in a situation where like they're like really low on sodium, ideally they're getting a quarter teaspoon of salt for every 64 ounces of water that they're drinking. And that helps you be able to use, because if you've ever had, and I've had clients, if you've ever drank water and you feel super bloated afterwards, it's like the water's not going anywhere. It's just like sitting and you feel really bloated. It's what's called dry sponge syndrome. We pour water on a sponge at first, it just kind of bubbles on the top before it soaks in, right? It's the same thing. So if your cells aren't soaking up what it needs to, there's a good indication that we don't have the minerals in there. We don't have the salt in there, because salt is what helps the water pass, in and out of the cells.
So that helps with hydration.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Yep.
Yeah, that's what you're saying. It helps with the cells to hydrate.
Yep. That's exactly it. Yeah. So I typically have my clients start small, because if you jump straight to a quarter teaspoon with, 65, it can cause some bowel issues. So I would say don't jump straight to that.
Right.
But I have my clients just kind of slowly, incrementally, like start with like, a pinch and like, 16 ounces in the morning or whatever, and add a little bit later, just kind of slowly, incrementally increase. But if you can get a few pinches of salt in your water a few times a day, it's super supportive for hydration. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then you could add vitamin C powder as well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. No, I feel like sometimes these sessions are like little.
Yes, I love it. Take notes.
No, I've definitely been working on my hydration, and I have heard about putting salt in the water. I haven't actually done that, so that's why I thought I just wanted to ask a little bit more about that.
It's really helpful.
So I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, and really,
okay, so now,
Well, I was just gonna say that for the like people always ask like how much sodium. really it's a pretty broad range, but it's like 2 to 5,000 milligrams a day, depending on like your size, how much you sweat, how much you pee. Like there's a bunch of things. But really, like after you sweat and after you have like a workout, like 1,000 milligrams is what's recommended for like a sweaty workout, like replenishing with 1,000 milligrams of
Uh-huh.
sodium after you work out. So just to give,
Mm-hmm.
the listeners an idea of like the range, and again, it's pretty broad, but again, I think if you just start with like a pinch a few times a day, it's going to get you close and just help with overall hydration.
Yeah, excellent. Well, particularly, I was saying, I think before we hit record, it's 35 degrees and humid here in Brisbane today. So we all probably need a bit of
Totally.
extra pinch of
Yes.
salt in our water.
Extra for the
So
summer.
sweaty,
Yes.
very sweaty weather. Okay, so I cut you off as you started to talk about magnesium.
Yes.
So did you want to
Magnesium.
keep going
Yeah.
with that?
So magnesium is really important for a lot of functions of the body. There's like 500 or 600 different reactions in the body that require magnesium, and because it's required for so many things, it can become deplenished really fast, especially when we're talking about adrenal health. So there's a big correlation between sodium and magnesium and your adrenal health. So just supporting it with a good quality magnesium can be really helpful for your adrenals as well.
Yeah. And do you mean that as a supplement,
Yeah,
I
I
know
mean,
there's different kinds of magnesium and different methods of
yes.
getting it into you or onto your
Mm-hmm.
body?
Yeah.
How
So
do you
food, of
recommend?
course, is always great. You can get like leafy greens, and those are always really a good source of magnesium. Some seeds, nuts, and seeds are a great source of magnesium. Pumpkin seeds and sesame seeds and leafy greens. But if we're talking about supplements, the ones I always recommend, either magnesium glycinate or bisglycinate. Both of those are really absorbable. There's magnesium threonate, which is really, it passes through the blood-brain barrier, so it can help with like mental clarity and it can help with other things. So those are probably the ones I recommend the most. If you're looking for, if you're getting, I would say never take magnesium oxide. That's like, it shouldn't even be sold. Magnesium oxide,
Okay.
magnesium
Okay.
citrate that's more for like if you're constipated. It helps with regularity, but I wouldn't say it's a good one to take all the
Mm-hmm.
time. It's not as easily absorbed by the body. So it's a good remedy for constipation, but if you're going to get one that's easily absorbed, you want to look for glycinate, bisglycinate, or magnesium threonate. And then you can always use soaks. Like, Epsom salt is a good source of magnesium. There's
Mm.
magnesium chloride, magnesium sulfate. Both of those are good soaks to help, and then it can also be a good source of it.
And
Exactly.
relaxing,
Yes, you get like, it's
which
like
is
a
probably good.
bonus. Yeah.
Yeah.
You get your
So
mindfulness practice in with your magnesium like supplementation. So yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I know there's something deeply relaxing about a magnesium
Yes.
bath.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. So that's helpful. So have a bath, sip on some water with some pinch of
There
salt.
you
And so
go.
see, I love there's lots of practical
Yes.
things here. What were there any other minerals or
Um,
supplements that you wanted to talk about in terms of supporting
I
adrenal
think
health?
the only other one I would probably mention would be chromium. Which you can get it in food. I feel like it's probably easier to get it in supplement, but chromium, it kind of works along with the adrenals for the production of insulin. So it helps with insulin regulation, which we also know can be a huge stressor on the body if our insulin levels are all over the place. And so chromium, I feel
Mm,
like can be a really good
mm,
supportive one for the adrenals as well, because high or low insulin levels are associated with adrenal fatigue. Because if you're constantly stimulating cortisol release from your adrenals, that's going to spike your insulin levels. But then when you get to that exhaustive phase we were talking about, then it's your cortisol levels are going to plummet, which means your blood sugar is going to plummet. And so good insulin regulation with some chromium is really supportive too.
yeah. Okay. Great. And what about from like you said before, like earlier on about nutrition and taking sort of inflammatory foods out or that kind of thing. But is there dare I ask, is there an adrenal support diet, or
I
is there
mean,
are there foods that are typically good or bad for for
yeah.
adrenal health?
I think kind of just what we were saying before with like, eliminating the inflammation as much as possible. And so An anti-inflammatory diet is going to be ideal, right? So eliminating the big factors, like usually, in my world, it's, sugar, alcohol, gluten, and dairy, the ones that can be the most inflammatory. There's other inflammatory things depending on the person, if it's like somebody who's dealing with, rheumatoid arthritis or some kind of arthritis, and we want to look at nightshade vegetables can be a trigger for them and cause inflammation. So it's really just getting rid of like the big ones that cause inflammation that we all know about. And then if there's any more specific ones that are just kind of perpetuating inflammation that, that they're including in their diet on a regular basis that we might need to take out while we're trying to lower inflammation. And then I always think, fruits and veggies, of course, is always, it's like a given, but because this is like a whole separate conversation, but I feel like our liver and like our detox organs and detox pathways are equally need to be supported when we're supporting our adrenals, because our liver has to detox all the excess hormones and everything, And so I feel like supporting your liver is also important when we're supporting the adrenals. And leafy greens, especially bitter leafy greens, are really supportive for like your detox organs and liver and like bile flow and all of that. So I feel like those are just they're kind of like ancillary, but I feel like they're still important when we're talking about adrenal health.
Okay. Now, the next question I'm going to ask, I think I can only ask because about 10 days ago I took a break from coffee. I don't think I could have asked this question 2 weeks ago.
You're like, no, don't tell
but,
me.
tell me my head was in the sand. So I asked the question with trepidation on behalf of every person that is a coffee lover who's listening to this with thyroid and adrenal health issues. But I'm going to ask it anyway because I need to hear your answer. Like, what about coffee?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I will tell you, it's a trigger in my world too. And I have some like real coffee addicts I work with, and it's like it's a tricky conversation with them sometimes. So
so let's be real. Let's put the hard line on.
Just tell us what you
think.
Out there.
Put it out. Everyone
makes
their own choices.
You can do with it what you want. I'm going to tell you the facts. So the fact is that coffee does stimulate your adrenals. So caffeine, not necessarily the coffee itself, but the caffeine in the coffee, right? Caffeine has neural excitatory effects. Like it excites your brain, which tells your pituitary that it's like an emergency situation. And that's going to stimulate the release of adrenaline and cortisol from your adrenals, because it's like alert. And that's what happens when your body goes on alert. So it does stimulate your adrenals. And so when we're talking about like needing to heal your adrenals, that's like, even if it's somebody in my world that I have no idea what their adrenal health is, if they're coming to my world, like we're going to stop all the things that are causing any sort of stress response in the body. And caffeine is one of them. Like it has to go for a while. I'm not saying they have to give it up forever. But for the sake of like, we're talking about stopping the inflammation, the stress response, it does promote a stress response in the body. And it does give your adrenals a jolt. And so if you really want to work on adrenal health, if you're dealing with adrenal fatigue or complete adrenal exhaustion, like the caffeine is definitely a trigger.
Yeah. You can cry now.
Take that and do what you want with it, but just wanted you to know the facts.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yes. So for a bit of context, like, to the question, well, I knew that I just think it was in denial that coffee made an impact for me.
Yeah.
Like I thought, other people might need to give up coffee. So, but I don't need to give up coffee. I've given up everything else. Like surely like my 1 cup of coffee a day, that's my little haven, my little ritual, what? No, don't tell me I have to give up that. But I went to see my naturopath it was about 10 days ago. And I'm like, there's something I'm doing regularly that's just not working for me. And I'm like, is it the almond milk? Like, I'm like, surely it's the almond milk.
That's
it's
what
not
it is.
Coffee. And she's like, mm-mm. And I'm like, well, I could. She's like, yeah, why don't you just try not having coffee for a week?
Gosh.
She said. I'm like, all right, I could do a week.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I could do a week. All right, that's not like, you're giving up coffee. That's like, you're just taking a break for a week. So I'm like, okay, I can do a week. And it's now 10 days. And I tend to become friends with I've got 2 naturopaths. They're both good friends. And she came up for a well, she came over for a cup of coffee yesterday. She came over, she had a cup of coffee, and I didn't. But, and I said like, oh, come on, how much longer? And she's like,
Yeah.
well, you'll know.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah. She said,
You'll
you'll
know.
know.
That's it.
I'm like, oh, okay. She said, if there's doubt, if
Yeah.
there's doubt, don't. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. So I feel like for me, I feel like I've got a bit more energy back. Like my thyroid was all playing up a bit last year. And so it's been very interesting that's, you know, in a short period of time, I do feel like reluctantly that I can say that I
feel a difference.
I think it's made a difference.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and there's ways, you know, when my clients are, I'm like, quote, you know, weaning them off of their coffee during this stage. There are ways to do it. Like, and then I tell them too, if they're, you know, getting back on it, if you want to switch to something like at first, it's like, if they're like because some of them are like, you know, I can, you know, take it or leave it. It's not a big deal. Some of them are like hardcore, like this is a big deal. So if it's like a big deal, I have them switching. Okay, can we just switch to green tea? Like it's a little less caffeine. There's more like, you know, antioxidant properties and stuff. I think it's a little better. So let's switch to green tea. Like it's not quite the jolt that coffee has.
I'm laughing because I don't know if you've seen the meme that goes around social media that's just like, you could switch out your coffee for a green tea and ruin every good thing about your day.
I know.
Something like that. Well, so she's like, switch for a green tea.
I know. It's so true. Well, I remember one time my husband loves coffee, and I was telling him, and I was like, you really need to lay off the caffeine. And I was like, you know, they make mushroom tea. He was like, never say that to me ever again. I will never drink mushroom tea. He's like, that is sacrilege. Don't even mention it. So yeah, I get that with the green tea too. But it's a good way to wean off. And then,
but there are.
Yes, there are. Yeah. And there's a, I don't know if it's sold nation or worldwide, but there's a brand called Dandy Blend. And I've found that a lot of my clients, like I have one of my clients, she never even went back to coffee because she liked the Dandy Blend so much. And it's caffeine free, and it's kind of got, I guess, I mean, I don't really like the taste of coffee, so I'm not a coffee drinker, but it has just kind of that warming kind of, I don't know, similar to coffee. So yeah, there are other alternatives out there.
Yeah. So, and I mean, typically, like if someone was just wanting to have a bit of a break, I mean, I know I just said I'm not sure for how long, but like, would you say, look, give it a break for a couple of weeks or a month or like maybe a week? That's what my husband said. But like, would you sort of say to make it a bit more manageable, but you want to be able to notice the difference or give you adrenals and probably got a bit of a chance to heal. So how would there be at least a kind of a
and I mean, it's going to depend on the person, right? It's going to depend on how much healing needs to be done there. But I mean, I would say, honestly, give it a good 30 days to really see the difference. And then you can kind of gauge from yourself, like, okay, do I feel, because I have some of my clients too, where, you know, I have a lot of clients that deal with anxiety, and some of them with like debilitating anxiety, and they had no idea how much the caffeine was contributing to the anxiety. And so that was a big one too, where it's like, okay, I can actually feel a huge difference with my anxiety levels without the caffeine. So I think giving it a good while to get out of your system and kind of let your body like regulate itself, and kind of, because a lot of times too, especially if you're drinking a lot of it, your body's used to that being like your energy source. It's like, well, I'm pumping it full of caffeine and it doesn't know how to run without it. So like, just giving enough time to kind of regulate itself.
Do you think there's enough caffeine in chocolate to be problematic?
Honestly, I don't. I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but I don't think there's that much in it where it causes a problem, that big of a problem for people. It's never something that I tell people like, you know, include that in your caffeine intake. So I don't think so, but I can't speak for everyone. If somebody's super sensitive to it, maybe they feel it, but but I don't think it would cause a huge problem. Yeah. You keep your chocolate. Yeah.
Have your chocolate. Dairy free.
Exactly, right?
Homemade.
90% dark. Yeah.
Choose your chocolate wisely and have your chocolate with your green tea, or your pepper tea has no caffeine.
Right.
So maybe some
herbal tea. Yes.
Or something like that. Yeah. Okay, that sounds good. See, like that's hard, but with a soft edge.
That's right. Doable.
So, yeah, absolutely doable. And I think that's important because, I mean, let's face it, no one wants to make changes unless we really have to. And so, and often we are forced into making changes. I wouldn't have given up coffee. I was feeling pretty crappy. and I knew, I mean, there's already things that I've been taken out for a long time, and I just knew there was probably something. I thought it was the almonds. I wouldn't have
Yeah.
picked the coffee,
Yeah.
but it makes sense. But it completely makes sense that it probably
Mhm.
that is a key.
Mhm.
So it is. We're often pushed into these things, but we do then need to make it
Yeah. Right.
doable, because otherwise it's not
Exactly.
sustainable. Or you'll go, oh well, that was too
Mhm.
hard. Tomorrow I'll just go
Exactly.
back
Exactly.
to it. So I do think whether it's giving up gluten or sugar or dairy or coffee, or or introducing a
Mhm.
breathwork practice, or
Yeah.
even having a
Mhm.
magnesium bath, like anything that's new in the routine has to be
Yep.
made easy,
Exactly.
doesn't it?
Slow and steady, and yeah, 100%. Mhm.
Yeah. So, given that you are Hope and you're offering hope, like, is there any other hope that you can offer in this space? As we kind of think about, giving people, some hope that they can feel better, take
Yeah.
action. Like, what would be a couple of things that you'd say to people to offer them
Yeah.
hope?
I mean, I think just, like the message that you have in, your podcast overall, it's that there is hope, right? That it's never too late. And I think sometimes people think, it's, oh, it's too far gone, and it's going to be too hard, and it's going to take too long, and I'm too dysfunctional or whatever. But I don't think, I mean, I honestly don't think, now there's never going to be, I don't think there's always a chance of everyone, you know, totally having perfect health, right? I don't know if perfect health is a thing, but we can strive for optimal health, and optimal health is always an option. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
think it's ever too late to strive for
Mm.
optimal health and to reach optimal health. I mean, it's a journey. I don't ever want to let people think it's like, it's a destination, like, oh, I've arrived, like I'm here. Like, it's always a journey. But I just always like people, I mean, just to have hope, literally, that there is always room, and there is always a way to have optimal health. And I think it goes back to what you were saying a second ago with the little small, like, manageable changes, like a little bit at a time, and not doing anything too drastic too quick to make it more sustainable. It's finding sustainable ways to make changes here and there, and to adjust things here and there, and to improve things here and there a little bit at a time, and all the little things add up. But there's always hope for working towards optimal health.
Yeah. I think what you just said there, like, the little
Mhm.
things add up. I think that's really, we sometimes feel like
Yep.
it's the big gestures that are going to get
Yeah.
us across the line, and there's something a bit more
Hmm.
exciting, or something about the big things, but because those little things that really do
They
make
really
a big
do. The little
difference. So
things. Yep.
I
They
think
really
that's,
do.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, Hope, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you think the audience needs to know when we're talking about supporting the adrenal health, connection with thyroid health, in this
I
space?
mean, I think just, for those who are looking for ways to get, like, easy ways to get started, and like, what can I do without doing
Mm-hmm.
any, crazy lab testing or anything, like just simple things to do, like, to sum up what we are saying, just simple things to do to get started is,
Mm-hmm.
first and foremost, managing stress in your nervous system, like regulating that, figuring out ways, like how you best regulate your nervous system, and find practices that you can implement every day to help regulate your nervous system. Um, Easy things, adding salt to your water. It's so easy and cheap. Like, you can get salt, good quality sea salt. Like, it's an easy thing to do. And then I think the exercise piece is important, and it's also like, kind of, what not to do in that sense. So it's like understanding how to do
Mm.
exercise to support your adrenals and not wear them out. But I feel like those few things are just easy ways to start supporting your adrenals, because showing your adrenals a little love, and like moving towards that healing process, and knowing, just reiterating what we were just saying, that it doesn't have to be these huge things that you jump in and do, like tomorrow, but it's all these little things that you
Yeah.
do that add up to the big things. And I love that you said that, because it just reminded me, I had a call with a client earlier today. We were talking about that, because I'd done an episode of my podcast. It was like 10 10 things you can do for free to transform your health or something. And so she was like, I was listening to the episode, and
Mm-hmm.
she said, I feel like because she said she feels like she's going really slow in her protocol. And I'm like, slow, there's nothing wrong with slow. Like slow is good. She's like, well, I was listening to your podcast episode, and I realized like, I have done a lot. Like all the things, she's like, all the 10 things you mentioned, like I've already implemented those. And I just, I'm not thinking about it, that that I'm adding salt to my water. I'm going and taking a nature walk a few times a week, or I'm journaling. It's like the little things that they're adding up. So yeah, I think it just goes back to just those little practices that do add up to the big changes.
Yeah, excellent. Well, where can people find you, Hope? Like, how would you like people to connect with you or follow you, or listen to your podcast as well? Add that into your list of helpful.
Yeah,
health
for
info.
sure. So you can find me on Instagram. I'm at the Hope Pedraza. I have a podcast. It's Hopeful and Wholesome. You can find it wherever you download your podcast. It's just all things health, wellness, and inspiration. It's health, it's wellness, it's spirituality. I love all the woo things, so I add that in every now and then. And then I have a free Facebook group. It's Live Wholesome and Healthy, and it's just all things functional wellness, functional nutrition. I taught human design, so it's all we do workshops and challenges and all Q&A. So if you want to learn and just kind of further your health journey, it's a good place to start with me.
Excellent. All right. Well, I will put all those links below in the description so you can directly access you. And so thank you so much, Hope, for being you and offering all of not just your name. I think that must be lovely having a name called Hope, but offering all of your your wisdom, your knowledge, your experience.
Thank you so much.
With
Thanks,
us.
Annabelle.
So
Thanks for having me.
Well, what I loved about that conversation with Hope was just the completely practical nature of it. So, as you know, from last week, we were kind of adding in a little KISS thyroid coaching segment right here at the end to help you to start to think about how you can implement what you've learned on the podcast. So I'm not sure how you went last time, whether you've incorporated essential oils differently into your routine. I have started with the frankincense and copaiba under my tongue once or twice a day, probably just really realistically once a day. But yeah, love to know if you've mixed things up, or if you've got started with essential oils, or what you thought about last time. But with this one, all about adrenals. Now, we didn't dive into adrenals for how we could use essential oils for adrenal health, but I'm pretty sure there's lots of stress-related oils that are in Scott Johnson's book. So hopefully you've bought a copy of that from last time. But in terms of, and so I might do a little bit more research into essential oils for adrenal health. But in terms of what you've just listened to, the advice that Hope gave, and she wrapped it up so nicely there at the end with 3 things that you could do. So what I just want you to think about what's one thing that you can take away from this conversation that you can implement today? One thing, just one. For me, it's going to be the pinch of sea salt in my water, because I have been already actively working on hydration. I think that's an easy thing for me to do. I've already got good quality sea salt. So that's what I'm going to do. In fact, I'm going to go downstairs in a minute and have a glass of water. I'm going to do that straight away. But have a think about what's one thing. Is it the salt in the water? Is it some meditation, some mindfulness, maybe doing some breath work, doing some research into other ways perhaps that you can calm your central nervous system? Is it to have go and get some tests done and see how your adrenal health is? It could be, stopping the high intensity exercise routine if you feel like your adrenals, are really fatigued. Or could it even be that you'll be like me and take a break from coffee? I don't know. That just was interesting. I just kind of snapped. And to be completely honest, I haven't actually missed it. I didn't get any headaches. I wasn't grumpy. For me, I feel like, I've said this for a long time, that I'm addicted more to the ritual of it than the actual coffee. And so I've done cups of tea. I've done a few other I've got a coffee alternative that I found here in Australia called Not Coffee that I have tried. I don't think it's quite as good, but maybe I'll try it again in a week or two. It might taste all right. But yeah, I've been surprised how much I haven't missed the coffee. It's been very interesting. So I don't know, have a think about whether coffee might be something that is could be, doing a little bit of damage to your adrenals. So anyway, there we have it. There is the KISS Thyroid Coaching for this episode. Love to know, what you're implementing. So if you're in the Let's Talk Thyroid community on Facebook, or you want to comment on any of the social media posts connected with this episode, please tell me what is the one thing that you're going to do to help support your adrenal health and therefore your thyroid health as a result of listening to this conversation. You have a fabulous, nice, relaxing fortnight till the next episode. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Let's Talk Thyroid. If you have enjoyed the content, or perhaps you're thinking, oh, my mum needs to hear this, or my sister or my bestie, I would love it if you would share this episode with them. That really just helps spread the positive and practical message of Let's Talk Thyroid and helps that broader thyroid community, our friends and family, to live well with their thyroid health. So you can just, share the episode. If you subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast, it's free. It's really helpful because then you'll be notified every time a new podcast comes out, and it just makes it much easier to find. There's usually a little subscribe button or a bell or follow often is the terminology. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be helpful. Of course, if you want to leave a review, even better, just a sentence or two about how the podcast has helped you. You can definitely connect with me via letstalkthyroid.com. That's where you'll find access to my book, my coaching, my freebies, and really everything that I offer in terms of thyroid support.